Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful new episode of the StudioMEcast. Today we have another special guest, James Tiberius Reinhardt. James Tiberius Reinhardt has a really cool set of work, and what we're really going to be focusing on the most is his writing, I think. But who knows? We'll see where the conversation takes us. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on here.
Awesome. So I want to... Sometimes I save some of the more fun questions for the end. I'm trying to flip this around a bit. Do you have a favorite film?
Oh, man. I have quite a few. I always, it's kind of cliche, but The Dark Knight probably is my favorite movie. Batman, Tim Burton's Batman is what made me want to be a filmmaker. Developed a lifelong obsession with Batman because of that film. And then The Dark Knight hit like peak film school, peak like me figuring out, my sensibilities and what I wanted to do. And that movie just blew me away. And I think, it's a cliche. A lot of people say that they love that movie as a favorite, but like it still holds up. So yeah.
Yeah, so you're obsessed with Batman. Do you like Christopher Nolan's other films as well? Are you excited for Oppenheimer?
I'm very excited for Oppenheimer. I do like Nolan's films. I wasn't as crazy about Tenet, which I don't know many who were of that, but I love The Prestige. I think,
oh my gosh, that one gets so little attention.
yeah,
it's
that's
crazy.
what I mean. Like it's super underrated. I think it's Nolan. I think it's still Nolan's best films. Like I'm a little biased because I love Batman, but like objectively speaking, I think The Prestige is still his best movie.
Yeah, I go with The Prestige or Dunkirk for the two, but like they're different enough that's kind of hard for me to compete, have them compete together.
Yeah, I agree, and I think he's a very versatile filmmaker. Like all of his films are pretty different. But like The Prestige just kind of hit like between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and like he makes this like after Batman Begins he makes this really intimate character piece about obsession with like this crazy sci-fi twist, but like it works. And you got David Bowie's Tesla. Yeah, I love that movie. But I do like I love Inception, which once again like everyone loves Inception. I really liked Dunkirk, and I usually don't like war movies. But
really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't like war movies are always a tough sell for me. So that one, like, I saw it out of like loyalty to Nolan. And I was begrudgingly like, okay, that was good. And I do think Oppenheimer looks really good too. But I also want to see the Barbie movie, which comes out the same day. So
yeah.
It's gonna be one of those like seeing Oppenheimer then going across the theater to see Barbie.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone say that they're like specifically not. I mean, some people aren't that into war film genre, but I'm not sure I hear people say that a whole lot. So what can we talk about that? Is there any particular reason?
I think at some point, like I kind of realized that every war movie kind of has the same thesis, which is war is bad, which I agree. Like war is bad. But it just kind of, after a while, I was like, I've seen this 1,000 times. There are ones I really like obviously Saving Private Ryan. That's like the gold standard. The Hurt Locker, Catherine Bigelow. That's one of my favorite movies as well. But that's probably my favorite war movie.
Interesting.
But that one, once again had like a different sort of take on it, looking at, how one can sort of become addicted to war in a way. So I really liked that, like just look at this small, intimate story set against the backdrop of war. That's what I really liked about it. Jeremy Renner, like, he phones it in now, but I thought he's great in that movie. It's just like, in the tension of that movie is just so fucking like, so palpable. I love just every scene so suspenseful. It's just, to me, it's just like, that whole movie is like a Swiss watch almost. So I really like that movie, and I love Spielberg and Saving Private Ryan. And like once again, that's peak Spielberg, I think. But a lot of the war movies, I'm just kind of like like it just looks like every other war movie I've seen. Which, you could say that about a lot of other genres. I'm sure. I think it just comes down to personal preference.
Yeah, I think there's, I think especially when Saving Private Ryan came out, that changed the way that war movies were presented a lot as well. Like a lot of people were and still are trying to emulate the style, particularly of just the first 20 minutes of it.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. So I want to bring this toward writing a bit. You saw The Dark Knight at peak film school. You're not that into war movies. Now, did you start off your filmmaking journey wanting to be a writer or wanting to do something else? Like, can you tell me a bit about that?
I think everyone starts out their filmmaking journey going into film school wanting to do it all. Like, you want to be Robert Rodriguez, where you're like, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna direct, I'm gonna DP, I'm gonna edit. And I kind of wanted to do that. And then in high school, I took a screenwriting course, and that really just kind of captured me. You know, like learning sort of what goes into writing a script, learning to break down a movie, you know, via first act, second act, third act. All that, the structure of it, that sort of spoke to me. And so I kind of got really fascinated with the process of writing. And I was always like a big voracious reader. I loved writing like, you know, little like shitty, like, you know, short stories in high school, like everyone did. And just like coming up, I've always just kind of been a storyteller. Like I've always just loved coming up with storytelling a story. So like screenwriting definitely spoke to that side of me. And then, you know, in film school, that's kind of like you're experimenting, you're kind of seeing what you like, you know, where your strengths lie. And as you know, as I did that, I found that I really enjoyed screenwriting and just coming up with a story and like coming up with characters and creating a world. And, you know, a lot of writers get very particular when they hand the script off to like a director to direct. And I kind of thought it was interesting seeing like writing a script and then somebody else directing it and seeing like what they brought to that table. And plus, you know, when you're writing, you just write it and you hand it off to them and you're like, okay, go make it. And, you know, that's it. You know, like, there's something really interesting about that to me, but I think it just comes down to a love of always wanting to tell stories. And to me, that seemed to be the best way to do that.
I've had that experience once where I wrote something that I had no hand in producing, you know, or directing, or I wasn't even on set for that,
wow.
which was because it was for a 48-hour film project. The first time I participated in one, I was in the writing room. I was the head writer, where I was the one who like actually typed everything up, you know.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people in the room, and but I typed it up, and then I went to work at my other job on the weekend, you know, at the time, this was years ago. And I don't think I saw the film until the screening night. Like I didn't see an advance, like, oh, hey, it's finished, you want to see it? Like, so that was kind of cool. Are you ever like worried when that happens, or like when you're writing something that you're not directing, or do you kind of pick directors based on like who's not gonna who you know will do a good job? How do you feel about that kind of thing?
Typically it's with people I know I like and trust. And to me, like, it is interesting seeing what they do with the script, because the script is just a blueprint, and then you hand it off to, and, you know, not only do you got the director, you got like, you know, you got the costume designers, you got the set design, the art director. They're gonna, you know, bounce off that script and create something. But typically it has been with, you know, someone I've known and trusted. Like you, I wrote like a 48, and a friend produced and directed it, and like I had at that point I'd sworn off 48s, and then he convinced me to come back for writing, and I said, you know, as long as I can write it and then disappear while you're filming it, like, I'm so happy to do that. And he was like, yeah, okay. And like the only thing that disappointed me was like there was a sequence I wrote that I was really proud of, and they couldn't shoot just for like logistical purposes. They ran out of time. But it was for the horror sci-fi 48.
Oh, right, yeah.
But like I'd written something that's kind of gruesome, but I thought it was kind of fun. But I was like, oh man, I was bummed you took that. And he was like, I wanted to put it in, but, you know, time. And I was like, I get it. But yeah, and he filmed it, and like watching it, the way it came to life, the way the actors kind of interpreted it, I thought was really fun and really interesting. And so like, it's just, I like that, just seeing what other people do with the writing once you send it off. And
have you ever seen an actor interpret your writing in a way that you didn't expect, like it didn't occur to you, but you felt like it really worked?
I'd say, you know, with my short Black Pines, our main actress, Jess, the way I written that character, that story had been in my head for years. So I had a very specific idea of how I wanted that character, and I'd spoken with her a bit about, because I had directed that one as well, how I, you know, sort of saw that character, but she saw it and she ran with it and made it much better than I could ever have like envisioned that character when I saw her performance. I was like, oh, she gets it, and she gets it better than like I got it. Like she really just understood this character, where she's coming from, and there that short film, it's only like a small snippet of what the whole story is, but like I thought she really embodied that character and brought something more to it than just like that small little bit that we see in that short.
So for that short, because I got to see it before we sat down here to talk, and so you did direct it as well. Do you find yourself directing often the stuff that you write, or have you ever directed something that someone else wrote?
I've always been open to directing something someone else wrote. I haven't. Ironically, last year for the 48, I was going to do that. I was going to direct, and I wanted somebody else to write it because I wanted to like try that. Unfortunately, the weekend of the 48, I woke up the day before and I had COVID. So
I'm sad to hear that.
Yeah, so I ended up I ended up helping with the script remotely, and our DP Jeff Smee had to step up and direct.
Shout out to Jeff Smee, who's a previous guest on this show as well. Check out his episode if you care to. Anyway, that's,
so that was going to be that experience, but I directed before a few times, a few shorts, and then I focused more on writing. And like I like directing, and this is something I kind of want to do more of because I feel like I'm not as strong as I want to be in that. So it's definitely something I want to get more experience with. But with Black Pines, it was at the point where me and my producing partner Alex were deciding we wanted to develop it and make this movie. And he was like, "So who wants to direct it?" And at that point, I'd been working on the script since like on and off since like 2014, and I was like, it's been in my head this long. I might as well just strap up those boots and direct it as well. And that was basically my attitude. It's like, well, I know this story in and out. Might as well be me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for I want to talk about Black Pines a little more because you're the writer-director of it, and there's toward the front end of it especially, there's not a whole lot of dialogue, right? Which obviously doesn't mean there isn't writing and all that. But I appreciated that sometimes people will go out of their way to have no dialogue in a film, and it feels kind of unnatural, like someone would say something there. Kind of a thing. And then when people do start talking about it, it felt natural in that regard to me. Do you find yourself writing action beats a lot more than dialogue, or like, because I think the only thing of yours that I have seen up to this point is Black Pines, but do you gravitate toward or away from dialogue or action? Like how
I think I do gravitate more towards action. I like dialogue, but I guess like dialogue driven movies don't really there's a lot of them I do really like, but for the most part a lot of dialogue driven movies don't really like pull me in. I'm very old school I have a very old school attitude when it comes to filmmaking, where movies, they're moving pictures, you're telling a story with pictures. But I'm also I agree with you, like a lot of times dialogue free stuff does come off as forced. And I'm very much like if dialogue works in the scene, it works, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. And with Black Pines, I'd written a feature script, and then we decided we were gonna write do a short version for proof of concept, and I didn't really even think about setting out to make it dialogue free or not dialogue free. I just kind of figured out what I wanted to do in this, and then when I wrote it, I didn't realize it until we were filming it. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, there's not really any dialogue," and I was like, "Oh," it just it never really. But then I thought back to previous shorts. I had done one in 2015 called Moments, like a romantic script, and that one doesn't have any dialogue until the very end. And then I'd written another script which I never got a chance to film, but it's about like a party girl. Like the girl goes out and goes drinking all night, and then wakes up, vomits, and does it again the next day. I'd written a script about that, and that was completely dialogue free. And at one point, I was trying to produce that one. Someone's like, "Oh, good luck getting an actor." I'm like, "Oh, why?" And they're like, "Oh, there's no dialogue in it." And I'm like, "Huh?" It just it just felt natural to me, that whole story. I didn't need dialogue to tell the story about this person, and same with the one moments. Dialogue's pretty key at the end because it's like the awkward morning after a hookup where like, you're making that awkward chit chat with someone and you're just like, oh,
I bet the lead up to that without dialogue just kind of like just the contrast of that, and then like when you do start talking, just probably emphasize.
Yeah, exactly. I
it.
wanted to tell the story of like this hookup at a party.
Yeah.
And like, they're all kind of swept up in the moment, so it's pretty much silent. And then like the next morning, it's like very harsh, and these two people wake up and they don't really know each other beyond like hooking up at a party the night before. And
do you like watching old silent films?
I do actually. I love them.
Yeah.
I teach a film class too.
Where do you do that?
I teach at CCAC. I teach production design.
Fantastic.
But I started off the semester showing silent films because that's where a lot of production design got to start. And a lot of my students are pretty young, and I could see their face when I'm like, we're watching a silent movie, and I could see them just being like, oh no, and then I'm like, oh tough, this is yeah. But like, I showed Metropolis.
You're in school. Do your homework.
Yeah, exactly. And I showed Fritz Lang's Metropolis one year, which is a classic. It's a 2.5-hour silent film, and I could see these 19-year-olds just being like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, strap in. We're watching this movie." But I was a little bit.
That movie is crazy.
Oh, it's crazy, but I love that movie.
Yeah, it's like I remember the first time I watched it, and it just blew my mind that a film this massive could have ever been lost for any amount of time. Like for a while, like there weren't people didn't know where any reels of it were and stuff. It kind of disappeared for a bit, and there's still bits missing. And every few years, someone will find an old canister of like a copy or something, and they'll release a new edition of it. But it's a really I feel like if you follow film online at all. You don't go too long before you see some kind of comparison of Metropolis and another more current film that was clearly inspired by some of it, like Blade Runner or anything.
And that's another film I show too. But yeah, like Metropolis.
Blade Runner?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that movie. I mean, one of your coworkers is admiring the pins on my jacket. I have like the origami unicorn from Blade Runner pin. That's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, like, but I try to throw a little bit of film history in when I teach production design. So like Metropolis, one of the most influential movies of all time, and like movies are still ripping it off to this day. But especially with the look and the aesthetic and production design, that was all pretty unheard of at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even like you can make the cases for C-3PO's design, even like maybe not as it ended up, but like a lot of the earlier concept art for C-3PO for Star Wars was even more like the robot in that film. So it's a pretty cool thing. I love film history as well, so this is great. But yeah, you like you said, you went into film school or had the original idea of wanting to do everything like Robert Rodriguez, but it's like you write, you direct, you teach production design. It sounds like you do a bit of everything.
I guess I did, yeah. And I feel like anyone who works in film, you find yourself wearing like multiple hats at some point. Because after film school, I was like I solely want to write, but when you're desperate to get your first film job, you'll do whatever, So I start like working at costumes, and then from there went into production design, and those are just two different facets of telling a story. So like once I kind of realized that, I'm like, oh, it's just telling stories in a different way. Like I kind of took to those things.
So when you write, are you let me see here. Do you have like a primary? Do you have a favorite writer? Do you have a primary inspiration or anything like that?
Not really. I think it depends on the story I'm writing. In college, like I was pretty like I called myself Joss Whedon light because like I was pretty inspired by Joss Whedon. Then I grew up and Joss Whedon being kind of terrible, so I gravitated away from that. But no, I mean I think it depends on like what I'm writing. I'll look at a couple different writers or a couple different films for inspiration and kind of pick and choose what I kind of want to use as something to sort of influence that. But screenwriting wise, like obviously like William Goldman, he's like the gold standard, I think, as far as screenwriters go. Even though he doesn't follow any typical screenwriting rules. You know, Tarantino, his scripts are definitely more like novels than they are movies, but
And he writes them as novels first a lot of the time,
yeah.
from what I understand. Like, they're not formatted, you know, like they're just in prose. At least sometimes he does that. So
Yeah, pretty much. And I definitely wouldn't tell like a first-time screenwriter to, you know, study Tarantino's scripts as far as for formatting, but like for character and dialogue, you still can't beat him. Like he's pretty great. But yeah, and you know, obviously there's lots of other like, you know, more literary writers that enjoy, like everyone else. I enjoy Stephen King, but like, you know, King, there's a reason why he's one of the biggest writers of all time, because like he gets it. I'm sure there's others I'm probably forgetting right now.
Well, you said also you're a voracious reader and you love Stephen King's work. Are you reading anything right now?
Yeah, I'm reading, because I'm a nerd, I'm reading J.R. Tolkien's translation of Beowulf.
I have that, actually.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
my wife got me a copy, and I was so thrilled when it came out, because it's like we had heard about it, you know, but it hadn't like officially been properly released, you know, and so that's excellent. I love really old texts. Like my favorite book is Iliad.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
Yeah, I love
did a whole
mythology,
show
yeah.
about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, that was my quarantine time.
Oh,
you
that's,
know?
hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I love mythology, like Arthurian mythology. I'm a big geek for. But yeah, I was just at a bookstore and I saw like Beowulf by Tolkien. I'm like, what? And I had to pick it up. But I'm usually like reading one book and I'm listening to an audiobook at the same time. I just finished an audiobook because I love horror. It's a horror story called The Worm and His Kings. And I love cosmic horror, and this is like cosmic horror is very Lovecraftian. But it's like newer, it's from like 2021, but it's also like an LGBTQ friendly horror story, which I thought was really cool. Like, you know, you don't really get a lot of those, I felt like. But yeah, this is like a very interesting cosmic horror take with like a really cool main character, and like just like it hooked me from the beginning, and I was listening pretty nonstop to it.
That's great. So yeah, I think Lovecraftian horror. It's like, how cool is it to have a genre like named after you? Like
Yeah.
an entire style or subgenre anyway. So well, great. Now, when you're writing, I want to get like really into how you do this. Like right down to the first draft you do. All right. Do you write it by hand? Do you type it on a computer? What does it look like?
I type it on computer. Typically, I used to do treatments, but I don't know. Like I never really.
Like before you started the draft itself?
Yeah, I'd do a story treatment, but this started feeling tedious to me. So I would just do like story outline, basically the big beats. Sometimes I'll do like a character backstory. Like for one script, I did like character backstory sheets, but they're like done like D&D character sheets.
That's cool.
That can help me figure out who these characters were and what their strengths and weaknesses were. So sometimes I'll do stuff like that, and then I'll just kind of dive into the first draft, which is always terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be not discouraged, everyone.
Yeah. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves. For
It's not
first
just
draft.
you.
Yeah, I always call the first drafts like the vomit draft. Like every idea you have, just vomit it out. And then you're writing it, and the first draft's always brutal and excruciating, and you're like, this is terrible, and then you're done, and you're like, no, I'm great, it's great, and then you read it again a few months later, you're like, no, it's bad.
Yeah. I feel the same way about like a first rough cut of anything. I'm like, oh man, this is not gonna work. But I just kind of tell myself like, trust the process. It's supposed to be bad at the outset. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm always very suspicious. I see a lot of writers who are like, I got a script idea, and then 2 weeks later they're like, I wrote the script, it's great. I'm like, is it though? You know, I'm like, let someone read it who's not. But yeah, I'll usually let it like sit for a little bit after that. And then I'll send it to like a few people whose feedback I trust. You know, always send it out to people who aren't just going to tell you that it's great. That you know that they're going to give you honest and constructive feedback that you can take and run with. And you might not agree with all the feedback, or you might try something someone suggests and it doesn't quite work. But it's always good to get an outside opinion on your scripts, and then just kind of keep whittling it away. I see it as like I forget. I want to say it was like Michelangelo talked about when he was sculpting, like he saw the shape inside like the rock, and he was just trying to like bring that shape out, bring it to freedom. And that's how I kind of see like writing is kind of like sculpting, where you're just like whittling it down, then eventually you're finally got that final piece. That's, that's the final work of art there. And I'm sure I feel like a lot of writers also feel like I do, where like, you kind of get it to a point where you could do more, but you're like, if I keep going more, it's going to be overdone. And this is, right where it, feels right.
Yeah. And your memory's correct. It was Michelangelo.
I was like, I can't, in a moment, I'm like, was that him? I can't.
Yep. Yeah, it was. So, very good. So when you're, are you writing multiple screenplays at once, or do you focus on one at a time? How's that go?
I usually focus on one at a time, which is hard with my ADHD, because like shiny object syndrome always comes up in the middle of writing a script, where like a new idea pops in your head and you're like, oh, that idea is awesome, why am I not writing that one? But you just don't listen to that little voice in your head. And usually I'll finish one, and I might work on the first draft of something else while I let the other draft sit and cool a bit, and then eventually I'll go back and rewrite that. And the process is never ending until eventually you get to the point where you're happy with it.
Now, with my limited knowledge here, I've noticed a little trend with some of your interests in work, which is monsters.
Yeah.
We've got Beowulf, we've got Black Pines, your film, a couple other mentions you've had here. Is that is the genre you like to play in the most or write in the most horror-based usually? Or
yes, I have an entire sleeve of the classic Universal
I've been
monsters.
Admiring your ink here. I see the Joker.
Yeah, I got the Joker card, the Batman symbol, Gotham Rogues from Dark Knight Rises.
Nice.
But yeah, I've always loved the horror genre. As I got older, it definitely became like the primary genre that I wanted to work in the most. And I've always liked being scared, and I like scaring people a bit. Like, there's a lot of creative freedom with horror as well. You can tell a lot of stories that you can't really tell in other genres, or but you can also tell really. A lot of people think horror is just schlock or violence, but like you can also tell these really personal stories or tackle these really big ideas, but just use it in the form of a monster. Like we talk about Lovecraft, but Lovecraft was tackling some pretty big ideas, like where did we come from? What if we are insignificant? Like these really kind of scary questions, but he's addressing it in the form of like giant tentacled gods from beyond the stars. And like Stephen King, he tells these really personal, kind of intimate drama stories, but with ghosts or monsters or ghouls or whatnot. So that's what kind of appealed to me about the horror genre, is like, you can use these creatures or supernatural forces or whatever to tell this really, sort of deeper, intimate story. Like Black Pines, the script itself, the full feature script is basically a story about generational trauma, but, it's using the Jersey Devil as, the vehicle for that story.
I liked how the creature, the Jersey Devil, was presented in the short as well. I like the design looked really cool and unique, and you were doing a bit of the like don't show the whole thing, kind of it. So which I thought was good, but yeah, I was like, oh, I haven't seen one quite like that before. That's a really neat. I love how the eyes came through
thank
as well.
you. Yeah.
That play, like, because there's any number of, that's an idea that someone could have and maybe they'd try to do, but then on the day of, for whatever reason, like they wouldn't glow like that properly. But it like came across super well in like every shot for that. I was like, that's nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was very particular in the script. Excuse me. I really left the design of the creature kind of vague. But when we decided we're gonna make this short, Matt, our effects guy, he had a couple ideas. I had a couple ideas. We sort of put our heads together and came up with it. And then the only thing I really had were like the horns and like glowing green eyes, like, and so we kind of jumped off of that using those two things. And I knew we spent like I think a total of $1,000 on that short. So like I knew I didn't want the monster wasn't really gonna hold up under scrutiny that well, so we had to not show that much of it. And originally I wanted to keep it up mostly out of focus as much as I could, but on the day, we were kind of battling the elements as well, so we couldn't quite get it like we wanted to. But we tried using quick cuts or like cuts. There was that shot through like the
through
sticks.
the brambles.
Yeah. I didn't want to show the creature as much as I could. And then I realized also too that I'm doing this scene with this monster in broad daylight, so that was
that was pretty bold.
yeah. That's another thing I didn't realize until we got there in the day. I'm like, oh, like doing this in the middle of the daylight. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people don't do that. But when I'd written the script, it's set in the spring, so like there's always like foliage and branches, so you never quite see it because it's always behind trees or something. We were shooting in the middle of winter just because that was when everyone was available, because usually not much is filming here in Pittsburgh in the winter, so that's when a lot of the indie projects are happening. So we just kind of had to, it's kind of make it work, We're like, all right, well, we're going to have to just deal with this now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just got to make it work. That's right.
Yeah. That's basically indie filmmaking in a nutshell.
Absolutely. So this is cool. I like hearing about all this kind of stuff. And of course also, it's a Pittsburgh film because it has Davo in it. So I would like to congratulate you in advance for all the Pittsburgh festivals that you're going to be enjoying.
Oh, thank
you.
Yeah, Davo was really, him and my producing partner Alex Casson, they really, a lot of credit goes to them, because when I was writing the feature scripts, I didn't really think about what I was going to do with it. I was just going to write it just to get the story out there. And then I was sending it to Alex for feedback. And at one point, he's like, I think we could produce this. And I was like, oh, what? It never even...
like when you send him the feature or the...
The feature, yeah. The short wasn't even... I never even thought about the short. When he first pitched, he first said, like, we should do a short proof of concept. I was like, what? I don't even know if it can be. How do we do that? And at first, my first idea was just to do a trailer where we just shoot a series of shots from the script. And then, Alex was like, he's like, no, let's just do a feature, like a short, not like a feature, but he's like, let's do a short with a narrative that kind of gives you the gist of the story, makes you want more. And that was a lot better than my idea of just shooting a trailer. So we came up with that short proof of concept pretty late in the game.
Now, is the proof of concept, is that like sort of a compressed version of a lot of the story, or is it like the first 8 minutes of it? Like, how does it represent?
It's basically a very compressed version of the first act. There's like a whole father-daughter thing that doesn't really make it into the proof of concept, but the basic gist of it, this woman's out in the woods. She gets attacked by the Jersey Devil. She shoots it and gets his blood on her, and then she starts turning into the Jersey Devil. But there's a lot more in the script. There's like, her kind of having this toxic relationship with her dad and how that starts manifesting while she's transforming. There's like a group of unsuspecting, college kids who are in the woods for their summer vacation, not knowing that the woman in the cabin next to them is literally turning into a monster. There's a dog, all these different things that sort of like they all come to a head at the end of the script. But we basically were like, what's the simplest thing we can do? How can we kind of get across this idea? And I knew when I first came up with the script idea, one of the first images that popped in my head was her like looking at her hand, and her hand's a claw. And I knew that I wanted to end the short with that shot. I wanted that to be the money shot. So once I knew that, I kind of knew how to build back to that. But yeah, so Alex was kind of like a driving force in helping make this a thing. And then I was working on a film with David. And he's like, what are you up to? I'm like, well, actually I have this idea for a film I want to do. And he was like pretty interested in, helping make it. He gave me some advice. And then we did the horror. Alex and I did the horror sci-fi 48, and our film won Best Film. And David like reached out again. He was just like, and he was like, hey, if you still have that idea, I'd love to work with you. So him and Alex and myself, we all kind of put our heads together. And a few months later, February, we're out in the woods, running around to 17-degree weather shooting this movie.
Yeah, weather.
Yeah, yeah, we had to. It was brutal. Our first day, Jess, our actress, she's a trooper. Um, yeah, 17-degree weather, like the wind's knocking over our tents. Jess gets hypothermia, is
Oh,
almost getting
jeez.
hypothermia. So we just called it. We're like, no, we're done. We're like, we're not shooting this day. We had shot some footage. Then the next day was all indoors, so that went pretty smoothly. And then, like, I think in the middle of the week, it was like literally a skeleton crew. I was wearing like 6 different hats that day. We went back out into the woods and like we were just running and gunning it, shooting like all the wood stuff, like as fast as we possibly could, just to make up time that we had lost that day.
Right. So I also want to say, like, the makeup in your film is quite nice.
Oh, thank you.
Whether it's the blood splatter or when the peeling skin,
Yeah.
or the claw as well. Who was responsible?
That
for
would
this?
be Matt Eames. He did the makeup. He did the creature design. But yeah, he like him and I, like when we met, like we just clicked. Like he immediately got what I wanted. He was really excited to work on it, and he like came up with this really cool creature design. So he did the design, and like once again, like I envisioned this film as a body horror, is heavily inspired by Cronenberg's The Fly and The Evil Dead.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Like
so-
with where the proof of concept is like going, especially. I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
So like I knew I wanted a scene of like her like ripping her skin off, looking in the mirror, and then like the horn in the feature script, the horns poking through her head. That's a little bit more gradual, but like we did it as like a quick like she looks at her head and the horns are coming out. The reveal of the claw hand in the feature script, that's a lot more gruesome. Like when I'm writing the feature script, I was like, oh, I can get really disgusting with this, and I am. But you only have 8 minutes, so it's kind of like we had to like sort of give like the highlight reel of what's happening. But yeah, he did a great job, and like Jess, once again, the scene where she's pulling the skin, looking in the mirror. Like originally, I just wanted her to start pulling at it, and then I was gonna call a cut, and we are gonna get another angle of her ripping it. But as we were doing it, like she just kind of kept acting, and she's like pulling it, and like her performance is so great. Like I couldn't call a cut. I'm like, let's just keep rolling. Like
Oh, it works.
and it
builds
looks
nicely.
incredible when she's ripping it off.
It's like slightly translucent,
Yeah.
It's yeah. I was like, oh, that's someone was behind that.
Yeah, Matt
That's
Eames.
nice.
He gets a lot of credit for that. But yeah, watching her do it and like the way she's performing it and like the way it looks just coming off her face, I was like, we're not cutting. This is great here.
I bet that like, that's got to be one of the most gratifying things for any actor is just when it's supposed to go, but they do their thing and everyone's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
keep it going.
But yeah, then like the big moment was at the end where like she's got the horns coming out, her face is all pale, she's got the claw. So like Matt had to whisk her away and do all that makeup, and then
How long did that take to put that together?
man, I don't even know. I was mentally I was just like in 3 different places. So it's usually I'd just be popping in and be like, how's the makeup? And they're like, good. And I'd just like, okay, I got to go do something, but yeah, we did it in stages, obviously, where we'd shoot a little bit and then she'd go back and to the chair, then shoot a little bit more and she'd go back to the chair. But the final product came out great. And originally she was going to have like those sclera contacts, like the ones that cover your entire face. But Jess had never worn contacts before and had trouble getting them in her eyes. So we decided to cut it, but I think it works a lot better without it.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it kind of had to be that way, but I agree with what you say there, because it almost would. It might have been too jarring of a change for the time you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, at first I was like, we'll have to cut it. And we talked about maybe using like SFX to make her eyes black. But once we got into the edit and I started seeing it, I'm like, no, this really works. So I'm just going to leave it as it is.
Something to look forward to for the feature then.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
So are you going to produce this feature? Do you have a timeline on it?
We're trying to. We were reaching out to some, production companies as far as like hoping to, get funding and stuff. And then the writer's strike happened, so we were like, oh, we don't want to be scabs, so we kind of stopped on that. We still had a few conversations with people. So we'll see what happens. That's the thing with, sending out queries is like, you'll get someone to be like, hey, send us the pitch deck or send us the script, and then you send it and then you get silence. But at least we're getting people that are responding. But
that's good. That's huge, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them aren't supposed to say yes.
Yeah, exactly. We knew it'd be a hard road. So we got some meetings and we've been talking to some people. But the ultimate goal is to get it produced and make a feature. The proof of concept's just kind of there to be like, hey, this is what it's gonna look like. But yeah, that's the ultimate goal, and we don't really have a timeline at this point. But we're kind of amending our budget goals at the moment right now, and then still sending out queries, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Do you know if it's gonna still be a lot of the same team, or perhaps cast for the feature, or are you looking to potentially cast again later, or is it gonna be sort of the same team, or how are you looking?
I would love to do the same team and same cast. I guess it really depends on scheduling and budget. A big thing, because I was always more about the creative side of filmmaking and not the business side, and now I'm getting like a crash course in the business side. But, a thing that we're seeing now is like, when packaging sort of indie films and stuff, is try and get some sort of a name actor on board, which is hard because they're not going to want to agree to do something with a nobody indie filmmaker. But if they're interested, you can get them to kind of sign like a letter of intent being like, yeah, I'll do this if you get the money. And then you can kind of use that to try and lure investors with being like, look, we got so and so who says that they'll do it if we get the budget. It's this big weird circular game, but like that's part. So if we do get the desired budget that we want, we'd love to get a few bigger names in there, but I'm fully prepared to like be doing this with a micro budget, and I'd love to do it with the same team. I'd love to do it here in Pittsburgh, even though the script takes place in New Jersey. Like, I love the Pittsburgh filmmaking community. There's some really talented folks here, and I'd love to keep it local and get as many of the same faces on board as I could.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking at starting to wrap up this episode a little bit here. We've talked about this project. Is there anything else that you'd like people to know about that you're working on right now, or something to look forward to? Any releases or anything?
Keep an eye out. July 8th at the Parkway Theater. I helped produce a short horror film called Look, written and directed by a local actor named Noah Welter. He's incredibly talented. Probably one of the best directors I've worked with, as far as like, he sent me the scripts and he was like, hey, do you want help out of it? And I was like, do you have a director? Because I'd love to direct it. And he's like, I'm directing. I'm like, okay, well, I'm producing it then, because like this is so damn good. It was a great script. So I helped him produce it. But he, like, as far as being a director, like, he knew exactly what he wanted. He walked into set fully prepared. Like, he worked with the actors really well, worked with crew really well. Every shoot day was 8 hours, which is almost unheard of. But just, he knew exactly what he wanted and just shot that and moved on. I just saw the final cut and it looks fantastic. It's just this really creepy, like, sort of two-person show. But yeah, so we shot that this past winter in January, and that's going to be premiering July 8th here in Pittsburgh at the Parkway Theater. We're also going to be showing a few other shorts. Jesse Hutchins, our DP, is going to be showing a few of his shorts, and we're going to be showing Black Pines as well there. We figured, if we're going to be premiering this film, we're going to try and showcase, the rest of the cast and crew. A lot of them, a lot of the cast of Black Pines, some of the cast of Black Pines is in Look and in Jesse's films as well. So we're just going to try and show each other off. So July 8th at the Parkway Theater, probably about 7 p.m. But yeah, come by, watch a couple short films, and have some drinks after.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being my guest today here on the podcast. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. And everybody, if there's anything that James here wants you to follow or anything on social media, it's going to be in the description, so we don't have to tediously tell you how to spell everything. So welcome to the new age for, the description of videos. So thanks a lot for listening and or watching. And thanks again for being a guest with me
Oh,
here.
thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.